Let me ask you a question that flips the entire China debate upside down. What if the real danger to the world isn't a rising China, but a collapsing one? Everyone has been worrying about China getting too powerful, too rich, too dominant. But what if China's biggest threat to the world comes not at the peak of its power, but on its way down? Because here's the brutal truth of geopolitics. Strong countries challenge, weak countries explode. And China, it's heading toward the latter. This isn't a cold take. This is a reality we need to stare in the face because a collapsing China may just become the most dangerous player on the world stage. Let me show you why. I remember living in China more than a decade ago. The optimism there was electric. Skyscrapers rising overnight, high-speed trains cutting through the countryside, everyone from taxi drivers to college grads talking about startups, property investments, IPOs. The sense of momentum was real. But fast forward to now, and it's like watching a balloon slowly deflate. Ghost cities sit empty. Youth unemployment is off the charts. Friends of mine who were once so proud of China are leaving quietly and quickly. And beneath the surface, people are scared. Not because the US might invade, not because Japan is threatening, but because the Chinese economy is cracking and the system built on endless growth is starting to break down. And that's where things get dangerous. Let's get something straight. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't rule by consent. It rules by performance. No elections, no real opposition, no peaceful transfer of power. Their entire legitimacy hinges on one thing: delivering the goods. Jobs, wealth, stability, growth. That's the unspoken contract. Break that, and the whole system starts to look shaky. And right now, the contract is unraveling. Youth unemployment is so bad they stopped reporting it. The property market, the piggy bank for the middle class, is in a death spiral. Local governments are drowning in debt. The private sector, the engine of innovation, is under constant attack. This isn't just economic hiccup. This is an existential threat to the regime's survival. And when authoritarian regimes feel cornered, they don't go quietly. They go loud, they go aggressive, they go to war, sometimes figuratively, sometimes literally. Let me introduce you to a concept in political science, the diversionary war theory. When leaders face internal collapse, they often look outward to rally the people around a common enemy. It's classic dictatorship psychology. The problem isn't our failed policies, it's them, the enemy at the gates, the foreign devils, trying to humiliate China again. Argentina did it with the Falklands. Russia did it with Ukraine. Iran did it on repeat. And now all eyes are on China. Xi Jinping has already laid the groundwork, right? Endless propaganda about foreign interference, jewels around Taiwan, militarized islands in the South China Sea, tensions at the Indian border. And here's the scary part. None of this is because China feels strong. It's because China feels weak, and weakness breeds paranoia. The more Beijing loses control at home, the more likely it is to manufacture a crisis abroad. That's how history works, and it's repeating itself right now. A lot of people assume that if China collapses, it will just become the next Japan. Slow growth, inward focus, quiet retirement from global ambition. But let me be brutally honest. China is not Japan, not even close. Japan has rule of law, a stable democratic system, a culture of peaceful transition and restraint. China has none of that. No elections, no press freedom, no legal way to change leadership, a deeply paranoid leadership that sees any dissent as threat. When authoritarian regime collapse, it's not peaceful, it's not slow. It's often violent, chaotic, and unpredictable. Think more like the fall of Soviet Union, the Arab Spring, Venezuela, or even North Korea if things went south tomorrow. And China has a lot more tools to make the fallout global. Here's what people forget, right? China is no longer just a domestic player. It's embedded in every major global supply chain, unfortunately. And it holds trillions in financial assets abroad. It's tied into commodity flows, shipping lanes, pharmaceuticals, and more. So if China collapses, it doesn't collapse in isolation. You get supply chain chaos that makes COVID look tame. And then financial markets locked by defaults and capital flight, cyber attacks as China turns digital warfare into an equalizer, and then strategic resource holding. Think about the fuel, the minerals, and yes, even weapons proliferation to rock states as a way to maintain global leverage. This is what collapse looks like in the 21st century. It doesn't just take down a country, it ripples through the system like an earthquake, unpredictable and hard to contain. Now let's talk about the most dangerous part of all this, miscalculation. A strong China is rational. It calculates risk and acts with discipline. But a desperate and weak China, that's when mistakes happen. Imagine this. A Chinese naval ship bumps an American destroyer in the Taiwan Strait. A PLA jet buzzes a Japanese plane and gets shot down. A local skirmish turns into a full-on crisis because no one wants to blink. Think about the Indian border. Why does this happen? Because weak regimes often overestimate their strengths and underestimate the consequences. They gamble, they escalate, and they end up triggering conflicts they didn't plan for. That's what scares me the most. Not a rising China that knows what it's doing, but a collapsing China that doesn't. We've spent years preparing for a confident rising China, building alliances, investing in deterrence and its ambitions. But are we prepared for a China that's falling apart? One that sees war as a distraction, not as a disaster. One that lashes out because it's bleeding. One that believes it has nothing left to lose. That's the scenario no one talks about. And yet, it is the most plausible, most volatile, and most urgent threat we face. Because history doesn't just end when big countries collapse. Sometimes that's when it gets most dangerous. And here's the bottom line. A collapsing China isn't something to celebrate, okay? It's something to prepare for, carefully, strategically, and urgently. Because when you corner a regime that has nukes, has global reach, and has no off-ramp, you don't get peace. You get unpredictability. And we need to stop seeing China's weakness as some sort of victory and start recognizing it as the next global risk multiplier. The headlines might one day say China is in decline, but what they should say is China in decline is China unchained. And that's the world's real problem now, and we need to pay attention to that.